Hello and welcome to the webinar. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. Again, hello and welcome to the webinar. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. Again, hello and welcome to the webinar. We'll get started here in just a few minutes. While we're waiting for the others to join, if you guys want to jump into the chat and let us know where you're logging in from. Good morning, hello and welcome to the webinar. We'll get started here in just about 1 minute. While we're waiting, if you guys want to jump into the chat and let us know where you're logging in from. All right, everyone, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. It's the top of the hour. So hello and welcome. If you have any questions, make sure to put those in the chat box for our presenters. While we wait here, if you'd like to go ahead and say hello in the chat, let us know where you're logging in from. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Tim Sheehan and Tim Peterson.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the OECS team for today's webinar. We're really excited to cover building a strong safety culture and share with you the 5 C's of workplace safety. My name again is Tim. I'm one of the owners along with my wife, Chris, here at OECS. There's our contact information. We'll go through this at the end of the webinar as well. So if you'd like to get in touch with us, if there's anything we can help you out with, I'd like to also introduce to you, of course, Tim Peterson. Tim, share with the group a little bit about yourself.
Well, welcome everybody to our webinar. I'm the VP of Operations and Sales. I've been with OECS for going on 27 years. The growth of what we've done and the expansion and now into the safety culture has been really exciting. And I look forward to talking to everybody and getting any input and questions you may have throughout the webinar today. So welcome.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Tim. And folks, we wanted to let you know the reason why we're excited to share what we believe is a lot of valuable information for you and your company is that we're on a mission. We're on a mission to inspire strong safety cultures that keep employees returning home safe. So that's the pretext that we share with you about what we're on a mission to do and why we're here today. And we've written a book. We're actually very excited about this. The team has put together book. And essentially, this book will be available and published next month. And we're using the outline of this book to cover the topic today. And the book will be Building a Strong Safety Culture, using the 5 C's as a framework. So we're going to go through, some highlights. There's a lot of content in the book. We'll give you some information if you'd like to pre-order a copy, or just let us know if you're interested, then we can send you that link next month. But that's essentially how we're organizing our presentation here today. And as we go through this, by the way, we are video recording it. It'll be available tomorrow on our website. And also, of course, along the way, if you have any questions, just go ahead and go into the chat function. Heather will give us a heads up on that. Tim and I will do our best to answer those. And if we run out of time, of course, we can follow up with you one-on-one as well. So part of the pretext of the book here and what we're after is to really help folks like you, leaders. We know, we look through who's joining us here today, a lot of different leadership positions you have. And one of the things we're going to share with you is storytelling is a really important part of building a strong safety culture. And I have to share a story with you right off the bat. And that was an opportunity I had to visit a milk plant in South Dakota last summer. And I was with Ari Cook, one of our safety associates there. And what was really exciting to see is how well this facility had done. In fact, the punchline here is that they had had no lost time for almost 5 years. And so I really wanted to understand, how did they do what they were doing? And as I watched the leader in this plant run the show, it really started to sink in for me. And you're going to hear us repeat this a lot. The first C is commitment. I mean, this leader was clearly committed in the plant to see that they created and operated in a safe work environment. Not only were they, number 2C, compliant, they had all the written programs in order, they followed them and knew where they were and utilized them tool. But the second thing is the culture in terms of around making sure people are getting trained. To watch in a very large facility, I mean, they're making literally millions of cartons and bottles of milk a year. He made sure everybody in that facility participated in one of the trainings over the evening late shift that we did the training. So the commitment from the leader, the compliance part, the culture. But what really was interesting to see is just as, he wasn't the owner of the facility, he wasn't the plant manager, but what he really was a safety champion. And we're going to talk to you more about today how important those few folks in your organization can be to help champion safety. And in the end, if you can imagine going for almost 5 years without one lost day, the efficiency that created for them with their, extremely low workers' comp policy and avoiding all the other costs that come with injuries, they had done a phenomenal job about that. So this is a way for us to kind of introduce the 5 C's to you. And we're going to dig in a little bit on each one here today to share that with you. But first, before we get into the first C, dig into that some more, we understand there's a number of you that, you might be in HR. Maybe you're the office manager, maybe you're the plant manager, maybe you have safety in your title. But it's not uncommon for folks from a number of different walks of life to be put in charge of safety. And Tim, can you elaborate a little bit more on that for us in terms of what you've encountered over the years?
Yeah, over the years of working with many, many industries throughout the United States, the biggest thing I have found is that the person that's now in charge of the plant or the production or of safety was delegated that job, and they're not really sure how it happened. They're the plant manager, they're the human resources. Oh, by the way, why don't you take on safety? Not many times did that person walk into this job with the goal of being the safety director. That happens at times, but what we have found over the years is that most of them were delegated, they were directed, they would say, oh, by the way, do you mind taking on safety? And that concept, is great as long as there's education and the things that we're going to talk about through that point forward. But some of you watching this webinar may have looked back and I guess I'm not sure how I got on the safety part, but I'm in charge now. And so, yeah, it's a very common thing.
Raise your hand if you can relate. Absolutely. I'm sure out of well over 100 folks, there's a number of you who can relate to that. And part of what we want to share with you again, before we jump into the first C, is there's a couple things. There's a couple things that we've seen that really help facilitate your growth as a safety leader. And that's having the right mindset and on embracing the power of storytelling. Having the right mindset means that, it's you. Maybe, if you're on the webinar, we're assuming somebody's tagged you as it, and you're playing an important role some way, somehow in safety. And so why not seize the opportunity and really do something with it? And Tim, you've got a story about just someone like that who was thrust into the position and watched them unfold over a number of years. Share that story with the group so they can understand just how great things can turn out as you embrace safety.
This individual, she walked into the safety position with the goal of some safety in mind, but didn't have a lot of education and knowledge. But because of that mindset and commitment, this individual took it upon herself to get her degree, get additional education, and make safety truly a commitment. That's something that she lived and breathed by. And over the years of working with this organization and her, I have seen the growth of safety, the culture of safety go to an extreme high level, one of the highest that I've worked with over the 27 years. And it's because this individual took it as a goal, took it as a commitment, took it as a directive to say, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And I'm going to be the driver. I'm going to be the one that really promotes. And so that mindset that all of you have here, that you're listening and part of safety, is my goal is, and this is how I'm going to accomplish it. And it is not just a job. It's truly a belief and a way of life that we work towards within the safety site.
Absolutely. So this is really important. And, one of the other things that you hear us talk a lot about is why stories matter. So the mindset, and, you need to discover your voice as a safety leader. And if you can tell stories from your own experience, ones that you learn of, or maybe you experience firsthand, they really help draw people in. And I experienced this with Danny Hoppin, who's one of our safety associates. He spent 30 years in the military, and he was sharing a story with one of our clients. And I was in the room and watched the 30 or so installers listen to Danny tell the story about being at Fort Ripley during the summer. And one of the privates went down and was unconscious from heat stroke. And it was very serious because they were worried about this guy because he was unconscious. They had to call in a medevac, picked him up, brought him to the hospital, and it was touch and go. And as Danny was sharing this story and relating it to their own personal life about grandparents, kids, sports, and whatnot, I just watched the whole group kind of lean in and listen to Danny's story, and they wanted to know, well, what happened to the guy? Well, luckily for him, the private came out of it okay, but it was really a wake-up call to his whole group. And, sharing those personal stories, we think, goes a long way for advancing the safety cause. Let us jump into the first C, and that's commitment. Commitment starts at the top. And we think that sometimes what gets lost for companies is, there might be a good catalyst that you, as a participant on this webinar, as a leader or someone who works closely with leadership, can point out. We believe that the catalyst, good or bad, might be something that can help build momentum for safety. It might be that you had an OSHA visit. Maybe the visit didn't go as well as you wanted. It might be that maybe somebody had a near miss. Nobody got hurt, but we've heard this time and time again from new clients of ours. It really woke us up. Maybe there was actually a serious injury or heaven forbid, a fatality. There's a lot of events. New leadership comes into a company, new ownership. If there's a catalyst, use it. It can be really used for good in the world of safety. And so one of the things that we share with our clients is that, this is a good book, 7 Insights into Safety Leadership. What I like about what they talk about up front is Tom and Kristen talk about that they discovered a big differentiating factor in terms of the difference from company to company. And that is the leaders that understand safety really have a chance of doing something about it. But they said that unfortunately, most leaders don't really get safety. So this is where you can come in. And this is why we start with the first C, because over the years, we've seen firsthand great safety leadership and bad safety leadership. And we wanted to slow things down a little bit. And this is in the book, and it's one of a number of things included in the first C, commitment. But we're going to hone in on this today because of our limited time, but we wanted to share a little bit about this. So Tim, commitment, what does great safety leadership look like when it comes to commitment?
Yep, that commitment starts with the desire to put safety above, equal to, with everything else in the organization. That commitment is to grow, to listen, to educate, to put it to the level that everything is based around that, and not just it's my job, but it's truly a commitment to get it to that level of where that organization can truly ensure every way possible that they're doing what it takes to make that environment safe.
So, and I'll tell you, I guess I get to play the bad cop. On the bad safety leadership side, it's lip service at best. Tim, tell me about on the great safety leadership. What do they say?
Well, on that great leadership, what they say is what they're going to do. They follow through with it. They commit to it. They document it. It's accountable. And that's the key thing. They make their statements, on safety and accountability factors, so that they do really walk the walk that they're putting out there.
And on the bad side, there's you probably don't hear a lot about safety. In fact, what you hear more about is let's go faster for production. Let's go faster to meet the deadlines we have to get the job done. So that's what's on the bad side. That was the say. What about the do, Tim? What do great safety leaders do when it comes to the do part?
They take the action and they do what they say. And so often I hear, well, I've heard that before, but I know it won't happen. But the great safety leaders go that extra mile. They document, they accomplish it, they educate, they inform, they actually follow through with what they're going to say by doing the actions and informing and educating all the way through the process.
On the bad side, let's be honest, it's not what I do, it's do as I say. And I'm going to be real inconsistent as a bad safety leader. I'm going to do it when it's convenient, or maybe when a lot of people are watching. How about having a plan? Tim, what do the great safety leaders do?
Well, the great safety leaders, whether it's the safety director or the manager, any level of that, they do have a plan. It's a documented plan, and it's a plan that they follow and they check and balance themselves with. It's not something that, hey, we've talked about it, that's close enough. It is truly written down. It's a bullet point. It's a to-do list. It's a directive to get to that end goal, and it's one that they hold themselves accountable for.
So it's a living, breathing document. On the bad side, guess what? If you came into my office today, I'd probably say, you know what? I think it's under that pile over there. Good luck, right? Yep. In terms of training employees, what do great safety leaders do?
Well, great safety leaders make training a commitment, not because it's a requirement, because their people, their labor force needs that education, whether it's on how to run machines or it's a safety compliance issue. It's not pushed off to the side and said, yeah, we'll do it when we get time, or hey, we got to cancel this because production. It is a commitment that they hold true, and they make themselves accountable. They're part of it. And that's the other factor, is that they're involved in this training. So often you hear the ones that aren't, they show up when they want to, rather than I'm part of this because I want to make sure my staff, my employees, my workers know that safety is really a true importance for me.
Let me paint the picture on the bad side. I guess, again, that's my role in all this. And I'm going to tell you, when it comes to training, no, we don't have time to train, because have you added up how many hours we'd have to have people off the floor and how much that would cost us? We can't possibly take people off the floor to train and so on. So we're off the job, and that's a big deal. When it comes to auditing for safety, Tim, what do great safety leaders do?
Well, safety leaders that really believe and work towards it, they audit themselves, but they also audit the process. Are we accomplishing our goals and objectives within this training? Are we auditing our facility to make sure we're not letting things slip through the cracks? Are we documenting, and are we meeting and going through this as a to-do list and making sure that somebody's accountable to get it accomplished and give them the support to get it accomplished? That auditing is really a look at what we're doing and are we successful? And a lot of times that doesn't happen, unfortunately.
Hey, on the bad side, we're too busy putting out fires. I don't have time to do that. I'm a firefighter. I got the hat on. There's just too many fires. Don't have time to actually inspect what we expect. On the bad safety leadership side, accountability is another big one, Tim. On the great safety leadership side, what have you seen for this?
Well, they hold themselves accountable. They don't quote pass the buck, but when duties and things are given to other associates within your safety team or your organization, they're held accountable too. It's not, well, I know you didn't get it done whenever you can. Just do your best. It's an accountability factor, and the support and the need to help that accountability really comes through when the leader holds himself or herself accountable for that task also.
That's awesome. On the bad safety leader side, let's face it, there isn't clear and consistent accountability. Hey, on the bad safety leadership side, we let things slide. So we're hoping you get the point here. We have one more point, though, we want to make on the input from the team, and then we'll wrap this portion up. Tim, when it comes to great safety leadership, what do great safety leaders do when it comes to getting input from the team?
They listen. They ask questions. They encourage involvement. What are you seeing out there? What are you seeing that's deficient? What can we do to improve? And they're taking that advice and they're putting it together with their team, coming up with solutions, because the people that are giving their input are the ones that are out there on the floor putting themselves at potential risk. And so the great safety leaders are looking for the value of input, looking for the value of what is being done on the floor on a day-to-day basis that they may not always see.
That's awesome. So you can read a lot more about this in the book, but we want to expand a little bit more, on the great leadership side and on the bad leadership side. Because again, this is the first C, commitment. And all of your employees are watching you. Whatever role you play with safety, they're seeing what is it you're going to do. And we find that, the ones who really succeed are literally safety rock stars. Tim told the story earlier about going on a journey. We're going to share more with you ideas on how you can grow your safety knowledge. We're going to share with you another key idea about how you can get more input from your team through this process. But they have a hunger to learn. And we've had clients too who literally, when you engage with them, if it's an auditing process or training process, they'll make the changes real time. I wanted to share with you too a quick story about where you can start from. And Chad Pease is an associate on our team, and he came through an interesting door. Chad came through the hospitality side of the business, worked in a large hotel in downtown Minneapolis and for a large chain. And what he found out when they said, hey, you're now in charge of safety. Remember talking earlier, Tim was telling the story about, there's a number of you out there who got tagged, you're it. That was what happened with Chad. And Chad told us the story about, you would think in this large chain, there would be a playbook. I would just get the safety playbook. They'd train me on it and I could go do the job. Found out there was none. There really wasn't a lot to work with. So he, like many of you, had to go out, do the homework, engage with, others who are knowledgeable in safety, build his own training program. But in the end, the employees knew he cared. And they rallied around the effort, and it really helped literally from the ground up, build a safety program. And this doesn't happen overnight. So we always let people know that, it's okay to be patient, and it's important to be patient. And Chad's a great story on our own team in a different industry of somebody who had to build it from the ground up. So great leaders, in summary, around the commitment, what they say and do, how they visually inspect and coach, teach, and train. It's so important. But it's important also to elaborate on some of the behaviors on the bad side further, because you may see this in your own organization and you may see this from yourself. And it's important that we call this out. Tim, from your experience, have you seen, circumstances where people at the leadership level aren't engaged in training? Why are they the no-shows?
A lot of times they just think their job is not part of that. Somebody's doing the training, they don't be part of it. But one of my favorite stories is a company I worked with years ago. The owner showed up at every safety meeting, started out the safety meeting with his statement of commitment to safety. He talked to each individual, shook their hand, knew them by name, and he sat through the training classes because he felt that his commitment to be part of it, to understand what's being talked about, to listen to the questions and interaction was so valuable. And that safety commitment within our organization was phenomenal. Not only did they not injure people, but when OSHA showed up, they had clean bills of health. They had positives all the way through. And that time that owner took to do that was so valuable, and the interaction with his employees was so great that that connection was really there. And that's really the busy part of it. The concept of I'm just too busy just doesn't fly anymore, because when something bad happens, you got to make the time for it. So that's one of my favorite stories, that for years, this individual showed up at every one of the meetings.
Yeah. You know, and we've heard this more than once, believe me, about, hey, we don't really, I don't need to be there. How much effort we put in training, in the last bullet point there about, hey, it's just common sense. It's just common sense. We don't need to worry about that. If it's such common sense, how do situations like this arise, Tim? What's wrong with this picture?
Well, everybody that's watching it probably already has a list of stuff, and some of them are probably laughing and some of them are going, whatever. But it really boils down to, was this individual truly trained? Obviously we got the dust, we got PPE, the list goes on and on and on. But did this individual get the training that he needed to do this job? Or did we just assume that he would know the safety factor? I look back in my history of doing construction and some of the pictures, I probably shouldn't be here today because of the risk factors I took.
Great point.
I look back then, I didn't know. So training is so important.
And one of the things I want to underscore, and the reason why the 5 C's, we're putting a lot of energy into this commitment part, leadership, is that it's often been easy to blame the worker for the mistake, the injury, the fatality. In fact, we're saying all roads lead back to leadership. And if you only come away with one thing, that is the one thing. Because the other thing bad leaders do is they create risk. They create risk for the company. And if they don't have their game on and are really following a good, solid safety plan, stuff like this can happen. And this is all avoidable.
When you look at these shortcuts, it's because somebody didn't look at the potential. What could? Did it get eliminated? We just let that completion of a job at times. And that's exactly what Tim's talking about, is that we don't allow these things to take place. We do whatever we can to keep that person out of that risky zone.
Another thing we talked about earlier is under the accountability part of great leadership versus bad is, guess what? There are things that people let slide. Tim, you've seen it 1,000 times. It's again, another example of creating risk. What we want to do next, folks, is ask you to do this. We want you to look in the mirror and be honest with yourself and say, hey, based on how you all have laid this out for me now, we've laid out our grid, great versus, bad safety leadership. Where are you? And this is an opportunity for you to reflect and really think about it. If you think you're a rock star and you got this thing nailed, and for the majority of what we laid out, you're nailing it, that's great. We want to thank you and say, keep doing it. If you feel like you need improvement, this is the right time for you. You're going to get a lot out of this next 40 minutes we have in store for you before we run out of time. And then as you're taking that poll, it looks like we appreciate your honesty. A lot of you are saying, hey, needs improvement, looking at a fair share, about close to 70%. We've got somebody who's raising their hand saying, you know what, maybe I got even more to do at the bad side of things. That's okay. So there you have it. We're going to move on then. And that really helps us kind of get a gauge of where you're at. And one of the things about storytelling is you can take bad situations and turn them into something good, folks. We talked earlier about, as a leader, you can find that catalyst in your organization. You can channel that into doing good as it relates to safety. And I engaged with when I spent some years in the RV industry, and I was talking to a leader of the manufacturing end of a RV manufacturer, and he's very excited, CEO of the company. And as the story goes, they had been in business for over 60 years and had never had a fatality. And he's really excited about that. But he had a sense that maybe they weren't as tight as he thought they were. And so he asked a lot of questions, and he really got a lot back from the company and the leadership to say, hey, we're good. We really have our hands around safety. We got a strong safety culture, never had a fatality, and so on. Fast forward, guess what? Fatality happens. He gets a call at 7 a.m. It's his leader in Indiana, because a lot of the RVs are manufactured in Indiana. They're there to say that, hey, One of our employees, 56-year-old gentleman, new hire, been with us less than a month, just got run over by a forklift. Ambulance came, brought him to the hospital, he died. And so this leader just felt an enormous amount of guilt because he thought they were in good position. He dug in and found out they really weren't. And it led to many good things. And so maybe there's something going on in your organization that you can leverage to really help, again, challenge your company to raise the bar. Because I tell you, there's one thing we talk about in this book, folks, and that is the burden of safety leadership. The burden for him is he had to sit down with the two young daughters of this employee who had been killed by the forklift. And he had to talk to them about this. And you know, what he shared was this. He said, I sat down, they were distraught. And to just add insult to injury, if you will, the two daughters shared with him that their mother had passed 6 months earlier from cancer. And the ripple effect that this has, and it starts with leadership. And he took ownership for that. And one of the things that I asked him, I said, what's the biggest lesson you came out of that? And I love to bring sports into this because sometimes there's a lot of great things we can pull out of this. And the thing that really struck him is after 60 years, never having a fatality in the company, complacency had reigned. It had crept into so many areas of their company. We never really had a serious injury. We never have had a fatality. And all of a sudden, the blade got dull. They weren't sharp. They weren't on their game. And Nick Saban, who's won a few football games and some champions, can tell you that's not a good thing. So a lot to take away from those stories. And, you know, we would just underscore how important it is you get leadership engaged. And also that you as a leader embrace this ownership on your own for learning. A core value here at OECS is that safety excellence is one of the 5 core values we have, that it's never ending, always looking to learn more and get better. Tim, what have you seen in your experience around the great safety leaders who embrace this?
Well, you know, the story I told earlier about the lady that got the job, had some education, but went forward on her own, got her master's degree, continually did online research, education, read books, went to seminars. All that desire was done internally for her continuous growth. She realized that this is a lifelong process, that it never stops. And once you stop learning, you stop the growth potential at the same time. And so I encourage everybody on that part of it is to become that great safety leader. Don't let education stop, because safety doesn't stop. It's a lifelong process. It's a continuing process.
Awesome. So that's the first C, folks, the commitment. The second one, Tim and I want to walk through with you too, is tell you a little bit about compliance. And compliance for us, we're going to really hone in on a process. Is what's your company's proven process? We'll share with you ours. It could help you in safety, but there might be ways that you want to evolve it or have your own today. And, you know, one of the things about compliance is, you know, we talk a lot about training again. And I was joining Gary, one of our safety associates, who was doing some forklift training here in the Twin Cities with a client, and Gary was showing the slide to some folks, and he said, well, how many people do you see here? And he put it up on the screen, and then he showed him the picture and said, hey, you know, maybe you just saw 2. When you're driving a forklift, there's really that many that were standing in front of you. But the point of the story here is that we had some folks participating in this forklift training who looked at each other and said, well, this is interesting. And so when we got out and Gary did the certification, the forklift certification out on the floor, one of them opened up and said, look, you know, when this whole compliance topic, the second C comes up, he said, look, you know, I've worked down the street here for 10 years. We never had any training. There wasn't a written program around how we were going to operate this. And, you know, no surprise, we had a number of incidents and bad things happen because there wasn't a commitment to get the training right. And so this compliance part is really important, because when we think compliance, we often think of OSHA, being compliant with OSHA regulations. And there's a lot to this. So we want to unpack this compliance a little further. Tim, you've spent many years working with some of our own former OSHA investigators and OECS and those out in the field. Tell me a little bit about what some of those first impressions mean.
First impressions for an OSHA investigator is crucial. How they're greeted, is it chaotic? Is it fearful? Is everybody just running in every direction? When they walk out into that plant or out into the job site, what are they seeing? Is stuff look organized? Stuff looks like it's a consistent factor. And then when they interview and talk to the associates, do those people understand? Do they have the knowledge? All those first impressions are, do we have a plan in place, or are we just reacting because you showed up, meaning OSHA? One of the misnomers is everybody thinks that if OSHA showed up, they're guaranteed to get a fine. That's their goal and objective. Well, that's not always a true statement. We have had over the many, many years, industries that have OSHA visitations. Not only have we had 0 citations, we've actually had compliments from the OSHA investigator.
Right.
So that commitment is there.
The commitment is there. So, the whole compliance C, the second C here, we're digging in a little further because what gets lost often when we talk about OSHA is why were they created? And Andy Smoka is one of just a great source of safety insights, spent decades with OSHA. He shared a story with us, and it really hit home for me as OSHA came to be because a number of spouses who had lost their husbands in the 50s and 60s, for example, went to their elected officials and said, you've got to do something about this. There are people literally dying on the job, well beyond our 5,000 fatalities we have today. If you can imagine the 50s, 60s, with a much less population in the US, there were thousands more fatalities, people losing their lives on the job. So OSHA serves an important purpose. A bipartisan group got together and made it happen. Might not even be doable today, but thank God they did. And they did it because they knew they had to address a problem. But one of the things that's interesting that Andy pointed out and Tim can relate to is that it's only 60% of the solution, meaning that these are the bare minimum expectations. And so we work with our clients to understand, there's OSHA regulations. Yeah, but, to really, truly be safe and have a great culture, you need to go beyond that. Tim, what have you seen in your experience?
Well, exactly. And I remind all my clients that I work with and stuff is it's great to be OSHA compliant, and it's something that you should always work towards. But as you said, it's the minimum. For a parent, it's kind of like getting excited when your son or daughter brings home a D- on their report card. They passed, but they didn't do really great. That great safety leader is going to take that, say, no, a D- isn't acceptable in my world of safety. I'm pushing for that AA+ level of safety. And that's truly the biggest factor behind that. And I hear that often. Hey, OSHA was just here and they said we were in good shape. Well, okay, so you got a D- going here. And what are we going to do to get it to the highest level?
Wow. So when my parents were excited when I came home with the D, was that just different? Maybe that was, for me, that was great. But
you were special, Tim.
I am. And I appreciate that. And moving on to our proven process. The nice thing about this, and the reason why we have it in compliance, is you got to have a process. This is something that, we've utilized for years, a version of it here at OECS, and we've evolved it and tweaked it. But it's a really important part of this, building the foundation, because the second C around, compliance has a tagline about this is foundational stuff. Tim, tell us a little bit from your experience, why the process really pays dividends and how important it is.
Well, the key of a proven process, we talked at the beginning about great leaders have a plan. Well, in order to come up with a plan, they got to have a process to follow. And that proven process is so crucial to lay out and follow and keep you on track. And that's really the thing. What are we deficient in? What are we going to go to next? How are we going to get there? And how are we going to accomplish the deviations and the differences that we have? So OECS is developed for years. Like I said, I've been with OECS for going on 27 years. Way back, we put this together. We really didn't know what to call it. It's just the way we do things. But without assessing and then developing and implementing and training and supporting, that written plan that we have isn't going to work because we have no direction. This is really your roadmap to keep things on track.
To get the foundation in place, folks, you need a process. And sorry, the slide got hung up there, but I want to underscore something that Tim talked about. And I don't know if we have any Bison fans out there. I'll see if I can get this slide to come up here. But you know what? I often, again, I draw on sports. I like to see success with teams. And And this really hit home with me because the NDSU Bison just won their 9th national championship out of the 11 seasons. And their coach, Matthew Entz, said, we have a process. And it goes beyond the playbook, folks. You know, having a process around safety is about covering all the critical elements. And that's essentially what we just shared with you there. And he talked about how the kids believe in it and it works, and the results speak for themselves. I'm sure we would all like to have world-class safety results, and having a process in place is really the primary point we wanted to make during this section around compliance. And Tim, when it pays off, you know, when you really have seen people commit to a process, put the work in, and you know, somebody from OSHA comes in to visit the location, or you know, the owner, somebody who's really dialed into safety, evaluates how they're doing. How does that work?
Well, you know, as I said before, 0 citations are realistic, but really where you see it and where the success is that if OSHA shows up, there is really no fear. There's no chaos. It's like, hey, so you scheduled my day a little bit different than I planned, but yes, please look at my program, look at my training, look at my facility. I welcome you because we have things in place. They are prepared and they know where their level of commitment has been and their success, because they got a process, they got a plan, they have dedication, they have commitment, and they have accountability, and it all comes back together to have a great process.
Awesome. And so that's the foundation, folks, the second C. And the third C, then, Tim and I, we've touched on this, but the culture building part of it. This is your DNA. And often people will ask, what is culture? And that's a really good question, because there's a number of different definitions out there. And I've gravitated to this one. And this is something one of our, the other owner of OECS, Chris, shared with me. And she said, you know what? Culture is a lot like electricity. It's invisible, yet it's controlled and transferred. And I really embrace that, because, you know, the classic definition includes the things that are important, your shared values, your goals, your attitudes, and all of that. But, you know, understanding that this is like this invisible force that shapes and molds the behaviors of people in an organization. And that's why we chose it as a third C, is that first, the leadership's got to have their head around the whole 5 Cs. You got to have the foundational parts of compliance in place. And then you start to really go to work more so on the culture. And a strong company culture can attract and retain better talent and produce great results. Let me show you a few things along those lines. Now, a number of you are clients. We've shared this with you. We've made this available. This is a great tool to help build strong safety cultures in an organization. We're available to help you with that. But one of the things that we don't spend a lot of time on, and this is done in detail in our book, is a report that I think is really impactful. And that's the Gallup organization did a state of the American workforce. And essentially, and you might have heard this quoted over the past few years, 33% of the US employees in the workforce are considered engaged. Now, how do they know that? They sample thousands of companies with 12 different questions. And I'm going to go through some of this. And they take all this data, the thousands of companies turns into literally hundreds of thousands of surveys, and they find out who's really engaged and who's not. And I'm going to share with you how they make that determination here in a bit. But what they also found is that the world's best organizations, not just in the US, but across the world, the best can have 70% of the employees engaged. Can you imagine the difference in productivity and the results as an organization if you can get that to happen? Well, let me show you what does happen. In fact, how they did is they took all these survey results and they looked at the top 25% versus the bottom 25%. And they saw some startling differences. So if you can think of 100 companies, the top 25 versus the bottom 25, not the ones in the middle, the ones at the top and the bottom, here's the difference in performance: lower absenteeism, lower turnover, lower shrinkage, better quality, higher productivity, higher sales, better profitability. And the one that stood out the most out of all these results, and you know, I dug into this because it was buried in there, was the employee safety incidents, 70% fewer. So I thought to myself, hey, we have people on this webinar, we have clients, we have associates on our team who want to help our clients, everybody get better at doing this. So what are some of these magical questions? Well, what is it about these questions and how they're scored? Well, here it is. One of the questions is, and I think if you can take a shot of this with your phone, this is something you can start to think about and talk about immediately in your organization, is this question is a huge mover. It's a basic need. I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right. Take a picture of that screen, write it down. If your folks can't strongly agree that I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right, you got an issue. You got an issue. That's where this gap exists. So only 3 in 10 employees, this is hundreds of thousands, could score a 5 or strongly agree. And you can see that if you're able to move that 3 to a 6, all of a sudden, big impact happens in that report that I showed you with all the improved metrics. So this is also a strong indicator of job stress. So I wanted to put this one in front of you because when you think about answering that question, and I've been in rooms where people have been asked that, and I've seen companies where employees jump out of their seat and say, oh my gosh, we've done this, and this, we have what we need. And I've been in rooms where you ask them that question, they're going, not so much. Here's the next poll. We'd like to ask you, what do you think the employees at your company would respond? And Heather, if you can put that poll up, it'd be great because I have the materials and equipment I need to do my work right. If you think they would strongly agree, let's put a 5 there. If they would agree, it'd be a 4. And so you can kind of get the feel for what that is. And so let me check here to see where we're at with that poll. As far as responding to the poll, if you just make a mental note, where you're at, that would be good to know. So strongly agree at your company, 4 agree or do not agree, 3 or disagree, 2 strongly disagree, 1. Where are you at? Okay. So as you're thinking about that, we'll move on to the next part of this. And that is the next question that we looked at is, do I belong? At work, my opinion seems to count. Very simple question. So folks, we're just sharing with you a number of things that are in the book that talk about, these are the specific actionable points that you need to get your arms around in order to build a strong culture as a company. And building that strong culture will obviously help advance a strong safety culture. And Tim, from your experience, when this happens and people's opinions are taken into account, how does that impact safety?
Well, it's the difference of success and failure, because so often I hear, well, I've told somebody this before, but it doesn't go anywhere, or they don't get back to me, excuse me, and let me know what's going on, versus I made the suggestion, I made the question of what's going on here. And it's like that the gentleman doing the saw cutting on one of the previous slides, the equipment provided, the knowledge provided, the education. So take what your workers, as a good safety leader, what they're asking and bringing up, and take it seriously, investigate accident, complete the process, and work towards the completion so that they know that their input is very, very valuable. That creates that strong safety culture as a team.
Absolutely. And so let me go on to one more question. And again, in the book, we go through this. I find this really important in today's competitiveness for top talent. First question was around, hey, do I got the tools and equipment I need? Second is around my opinion counts. This one, in the last 6 months, someone at work has talked to me about my progress. You might be going, what does this have to do with culture? Tim, what does this have to do with building a strong safety culture? It has everything to do, because this is how you raise engagement. And when you raise engagement from an employee in the company, they're going to care a whole lot more, not just about themselves, but their teammates. And there's sometimes where this goes in the wrong direction. Again, only 3 in 10 in the US. Tim, you had an interesting story to share about this.
My grandson recently got a job at a manufacturing firm. And one of the things he was told is, after a 3-month period, we're going to put you into a different educational program for whatever the task may be. So he came home the other day after working, and he was going to talk to me about stuff, and he was just depressed. And I said, hey, what's wrong? He said, well, my 3-month window happened and I didn't hear anything. So I went and talked to my supervisor, and the supervisor's comment was, oh, geez, I totally forgot about it. We're going to have to wait for the next cycle. And you could just see that his whole enthusiasm was just depleted, and something that he had worked for, somebody had forgotten about. So that growth not only drives education and knowledge and quality, but it drives that attitude towards safety and input and valuability. So make sure that we really work towards that. It's crucial as a safety leader to listen, to follow through, and to implement.
That's really important. So those are some of the things, again, we're just touching on the surface. There's a lot more you can read about if you're interested in the book when it comes out next month. But our message here is simple, that there are some very specific things you can do to shape the culture. And those are examples that we share. We think that study is one of the most pivotal that's been done in decades about really understanding how you impact this. Now, we want to move before we've got another 12, 15 minutes here. We want to move ahead and come to the next C. And the fourth C is champions. And the reason why champions are so important is that this isn't about the quantity as much as the quality. The champions are the folks that you want to find in your organization that are going to help you move the dial as a leader. And I want to share a story with you. I engaged with a champion back again to my days in the RV business. I was the new CEO of this dealership down in Florida, very excited about my job. And geez, it was 2 weeks into it. And I didn't know a lot about RVing, which is interesting in itself, but there I was. And Judy came into my office and said, you need to follow me right now. And I said, well, what's going on? She says, well, I just want to let you know I'm part of the safety committee. And whenever we have an escalation with a customer, it's my job to make sure that the people who might be the target get removed to a safe area, and we call the sheriff. And I go, what's the issue? Well, in RVs, there's a lot of repair needs. Let's just say that, I came out of another industry. I wasn't used to a house on wheels. Well, one of the customers at the dealership had been staying there for a number of days and got angry that his parts weren't in and his RV wasn't repaired, and decided to let everyone know that he's going to take the gun out of his RV, go find the CEO and rectify the situation. And that was me. So Julie handled this thing amazingly well. She got me to safety and some other folks. She communicated with people within the dealership. And this is a 20-acre site. She contacted the sheriff. She did a lot of things. And needless to say, when the sheriff showed up, they had been around the block on this. This wasn't his first rodeo. They resolved and de-escalated things very quickly. But I will tell you that knowing that we had a safety champion like her on the team was amazing. And one of the things that we have found that safety champions can do is they can change the game. So we strongly recommend that you look at safety committee as a platform for where you can bring the champions together and do something. Tim, share with us some of your experience and what you've seen in terms of how a safety committee can really become a powerful platform for this.
Well, it starts with that safety champion, and the person I was talking about before, the young lady that moved on, created this and was really the glue or the catalyst to get it going, but created a safety committee of people that wanted to be part of it, that were engaged in safety, that had input, that had the desire, not that they were just appointed. And so often safety committees, you're it. And it's like, really, I don't really want to do that, but I guess it's part of my job. And there's no cohesiveness, and there's no success because nobody really wants to be there. The other thing is that the safety committee that's really successful, their input is valuable. Their recommendations get evaluated by upper management if they need to be. Decisions are made, they're followed through with. It's just not a lip service type thing. They run a documentation, they hold themselves accountable, and they don't do it because OSHA said you got to have a safety committee. They do it because the safety committee is the voice. It's that interaction between labor and management to get things done on a very, very proactive level with their input, with everybody's value, and making it a successful and very useful committee.
You'll read some other stories in the book about a number of associates who've seen this firsthand, like Tim. The reason why, out of the many C's you can include in a 5C framework, we chose champions is because we've seen time and time again, like Tim said, the dial can move with a handful of the right people. And, the safety committee is a way to do that. And we've seen some best practices that Tim shared with you about, having people who are engaged. We've heard also some best practices is rotating membership, which is important. Another one is creating recognition and rewards programs, not only for the people on the committee, but of course for the rest of the folks in the company. it's just an important part of building a strong safety culture. And this committee is the way to go. Now, one of the things that we would suggest to you too is that, frequency matters. If you're a smaller organization, it might not have to be as frequent, but when you have a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of employees, a lot of projects, frequency can help build momentum. Have you seen that, Tim, in your experience?
It is. And that's the part that we do it because of success and value, not that it's a requirement. So whether you meet monthly, every other month, whatever, determine the value of what you need to accomplish and the consistency that you're creating that process to get accomplished on a regular basis.
One thing that we talked about is champions. That's the C. And another way to look at this is through the lens that Seth Godin wrote this book in marketing. He's written a whole series of books in marketing and really a good author. And he has a term in there. He wrote a book on linchpins. And I lifted part of that from Seth because I thought that was really applicable to what we're talking about here. And this might help you think about some people in your organization that really could be engaged with and be a part of the safety movement. And that is, these folks are creative. They deal in complex environments. They're a linchpin. You can't do without them. They have deep knowledge in certain areas, and they have certain talents that others don't have that they can really bring some great insights. So we really encourage you to think about, those linchpins in your organization to get involved in safety. And, we won't take the poll now here, but I'd ask you to ask yourself, again, looking in the mirror, are you running a great safety committee? Based on everything you heard here, is there a chance for you to do some work and improve your safety committee now that you see it in the context of the framework? And maybe you're one of the organizations and you wouldn't be alone. There's many of them, they don't have one. And this is an opportunity to actually put one in place. And the other part that I would add too is in an organization, having a safety as a core value is really important. Let's move on to the final C, and that's costs. And, when we think about costs, and we'll elaborate more about this in the book, but, one of the things we talk about here is just keep in mind, 97% of the incidents that happen are within someone's control. And the ultimate cost is the loss of life. So when we think of costs, all this work we're doing in the 5 C's, it has to do with people, life, and the dollars of the business as well. So, we've got $1 billion a week in this United States going out the window due to injuries. And this is just for those injuries that include 3 or more lost days, $1 billion a week. We've got a number of injuries at work that can happen, but I tell you, there's a lot of lists out there. You can find them on the internet. It's detailed in the book, but I wanted to have Tim elaborate a little bit on this example. And I took this from one of our training presentations. Tim, share with folks what the impact of this can really mean.
We're looking at machine guarding. It goes back to what we've already talked about: commitment, input, auditing, evaluation, a plan, inspections. And when something as simple as machine guarding is bypassed because the machine still works, everything's going good, but we don't look at the machine guarding, people, your employees, our friends, our neighbors, relatives can lose body parts, they lose quality of life, and in some cases they lose life totally. So little things really need to be taken part of that plan and put it together so that things like machine guarding don't get missed.
Awesome. And so, another one is this picture is tough to look at, but again, bringing this to home when people go, well, what's the cost? Well, there's massive costs, impact to human life, like Tim talked about, and the dollars associated with this.
A lot of it is lack of training and lack of time when it comes to something like this. We don't have time to do it this way. We got to get the job done. And so shortcuts are taken.
Folks, here's the money slide. If you got a camera, take a picture. If you want to etch something in your mind, do this. We're trying to equip you as leaders here before we wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so with the information around, hey, what's the true cost of us not taking action or not elevating our safety game to the next level? And this is something that's a deep study that the folks from OSHA did. And it's great because it really highlights the fact that for every $1 you invest towards PPE, training, proper tools and equipment, machine guarding, et cetera, you're going to get a $4 to $6 return on that. But it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. But when you make the investment, you will see this play out over time, and you'll see it in lower injury related costs, better productivity, and so on. And ultimately, some will see it in their EMR rating, which can mean all kinds of things. And we elaborate more on this in the book. But I would just share with you, Tim and I go through this. We go through it in a little more detail in the book, but we look at the 20 things that happen when you have injuries. No worries about all the eye charting here. You don't have to look at it in detail, but the point of all this evaluation analysis is that you're going to dramatically impact your productivity, sales, and costs when you have one injury. You know, we went through the whole process. If one injury happens, the ripple effect through productivity, the ripple effect through sales and costs. For example, we've talked to some folks, owners of companies, who say, you know, when you have a serious injury or fatality, there are people who won't come back to work. They don't want to be back on that scene where it happened. It's really serious. So, and until you go through some of that experience, you don't know. Would like to, Tim, as we bring it home here and pulling it all together, share a story with us that is real life, folks, that hits home, and Tim can elaborate further here.
Yeah, about 10 years ago, I got a call from a insurance company to investigate a fatality. So I flew down to Georgia, and everything that we talked about so far today wasn't being done, was done wrong, from a plan to auditing, to inspections, to quality, to training. And this individual was offloading some very, very large pieces of steel, like 10,000 pound plus steel. And the racking system that they were being put in was never inspected, and it failed. And this individual was trapped between two pieces of very large steel, right below his hips. And when the EMTs got there to rescue him and everything, they looked at it and said, we got to tell you that as soon as we release this steel, you're going to bleed out. We can't control it. The steel is keeping you alive with the pressure. At that point in time, he wrote his last will and testament. He called and got his two boys on the phone to say goodbye. And in a split second, when that steel was released, he was gone. If these things would have been done, these were preventables because it was not inspected. It was not the right equipment. The training was done. He was in the wrong place. All those factors come to play. But in that split second, the two boys lost a dad. The lady lost a husband. Co-workers lost a co-worker because safety wasn't a commitment. Safety wasn't a core process. And so when I read his last will and testament, it was tough to read. I mean, imagine writing your last will and testament. As you know, within the next few minutes, you're going to be gone. And what you see on the screen now never will happen in that family. His two kids will never hug their dad. So make sure you look at this as a value, not as a commitment to compliance, but as an importance to life and family and quality.
Thanks, Tim. And for those of you who are with us, we really appreciate your input. If this was found valuable for you, please let us know. And if you want to put in the chat, give us a 3. If there was good info, a 2. If we missed it, a 1. And we appreciate that and your participation. I'd also like to share with you while you're doing that is here's who you can contact again. Just take a picture of that. We'll be happy to put on seminars at your company. We can work with you on customizing a program. Tim and I have done a number of those. If you would like to pre-order the book, just drop me an email at Tim S there, and I'll get you on the list, and we'll let you know when that becomes available. And if you need any other help with this, if you just have a question about something maybe we touched on, if it has to do with your core process about safety, has to do with safety committees, getting those in place, about identifying champions, about the business case for safety. We didn't do that justice for today, folks. We usually have a separate webinar on that alone. We'll be happy to talk with you. Give us a call, email, anything we can do to help move the dial for your company. We'd love to do it. And thank you very much.